in your judgment, are voter ID laws racist? Professor Tolson.
Thank you for that question. So it depends. One thing we have to stop doing is treating all voter ID laws as the same.
Okay, so your answer, I want to move quickly, so it depends is your answer?
Yes, that's my answer.
Okay, so what voter ID laws are racist?
Apologies, Mr. Cruz, your state of Texas, perhaps?
Okay, so you think the entire state of Texas is racist. What about requiring an ID to vote is racist?
So I think, sir, that's pretty reductive. I'm not saying the entire state of Texas is racist.
You just said my state of Texas, so you tell me,
Your
what
voter
about the Texas voter ID
absolutely.
laws is racist?
So the fact that the voter ID law was put into place to diminish the political power of Latinos with racist intent and had been found to have
You're
racist
asserting
intent,
that. What's your evidence for that?
the federal district court that first resolved the constitutionality of Texas's voter ID law.
Okay, so your view is voter ID laws are racist.
There are some voter ID laws that are racially discriminatory in intent.
How about in practice? In intent, fine, you say there's some racist with a malevolent intent lurking in the back of their mind. But let's just talk about it as a practical matter. When I go to vote, they ask me for my ID. I pull out my ID, I show it to them, I vote. Is that racist?
If the law that requires you to do that was motivated by racially discriminatory intent
What about the
under
effect?
our
Set
Constitution.
aside intent. Set aside intent. I'm asking about the effect.
Yes, in effect, I
Okay,
think that
Ms.
there are
Reardon.
discriminatory effects from a number of voter ID laws.
35 states across the country disagree with that because 35 states have voter ID laws in effect. But not just 35 states. 81% of voters in America disagree with the radical views proposed by the Democrats and the Democratic witnesses. Not just 81% of Americans. 77% of black voters in America support voter ID laws. 78% of Hispanic voters in America support voter ID laws. 81% of low-income Americans support voter ID laws. And yet, what this bill is about is putting radicals in charge of saying, if you require an ID to vote, that is racist and must be struck down. This is all about partisan power.
The questions that have been asked so far in this debate illustrate why the American people don't trust the media. This is not a cage match. And you look at the questions. Donald Trump, are you a comic book villain? Ben Carson, can you do math? John Kasich, will you insult two people over here? Marco Rubio, why don't you resign? Jeb Bush, why have your numbers fallen? How about talking about the substantive issues people care about?
Still can't get one to fall. Cruz knocks down a mid-range. Blocked by Jimmy. Gets it back. Throws it. Oh, he hit it and lands it. Thank goodness this is over.
Senator Cruz wins the game.
You can scream and yell, abolish the police, and this virus, magically, no one will get infected. You can French kiss the guy next to you, yelling, abolish the police, and no one will get infected. But if you go to church and say, amazing grace, everyone's going to die. And
I like the story.
Biden came around to the Senate floor. I'm talking to Joe on the Democratic side, and Biden comes behind me. And he puts both hands on my shoulders and begins rubbing my shoulders and kind of rocking back and forth. And I'm kind of like new to the Senate going, dude, what? Like, and he turns to Manchin and he says, you know, there's nothing worse than a smart Republican.